Okay, good day and welcome back to the channel, everybody. I've got an update on the 335 Minneapolis Moline project. The title of this one is Mistakes. We'll get to that in a minute. So first thing I've got to show you is I've got the throwout bearing back on the carrier and the carrier back in the housing. One of the interesting things and one of the reasons that I went after a utility 335 is because I've already got a utility 445, and the goal is when they're both finished to be able to point out the differences in the two, because there are some glaring differences that when you're 50 feet away you can't tell, but when you're actually inside of them there's substantial differences, and one of them is the depth of this housing. In a 445 it's considerably deeper. This shaft is considerably longer. And so the clutch springs sit inside. So you can see here there's one set of springs, but not near heavy enough to pull that bearing back. Even with the clutch pack up against it and those springs, it still isn't enough. So on a 335 there's a secondary spring on the outside that holds that clutch pedal up. On a 445 that doesn't exist. So it's just a fun fact that between the two, and again the goal is that when they're done hopefully I can do a video and talk about all of these differences. Now this, according to the manual, this is supposed to come straight out, and then the spring should only go from here to here. And the bracket that was on there stood about, I don't know, that tall. And so I went and bought a spring that was comparative to the one that was on there, and decided to redo the bracket so that this spring fits, because I really don't think it matters, because this isn't the right one anyway. But that's done. And then from there we get into the brakes. After I got these brake pedals cleaned up, there were some more, I should say the weldments were much more noticeable, and now you can really clearly see we obviously had a break right here, and I'm pretty sure that we had a break clean across here. So I think this brake pedal broke in two places, and when we welded it back together we meant business. As you can see, much more clear now that that gunk and paint is gone. Again, it's just going to add character to this tractor. It's just a talking point. I don't know what you had to do to make that happen, but whatever it was substantial. Anyway, I've got this this brake set put back in, and that's where mistake number one came in. So last year I did the brakes on my 445, and I knew that I had this project coming up, so I ordered a second set. So I got 4 for that one, 4 for this one, 8 total, not thinking that there was going to be any difference. So here is the brand new brake pad from the 445, and here is the brake pad I took out of the 335. There's a pretty big difference there. So unfortunately, I now have 4 brake pads for my 445 that I'll probably never need, because I'll never use the brakes heavy enough to have to do another brake job to it. So these will go on the shelf for maybe another project. So anyway, I ended up digging these back out of the garbage, luckily before the garbage came and picked up. Cleaned them up. They look okay. I mean, if you look at, let's see if I can do this, the thickness on this one versus the thickness on this one, the new one's obviously a lot thicker, but there's still a lot of decent pad left on this one, and all four of them look like this after I got them cleaned up, so I don't feel too bad about putting these back in and reusing them. But yeah, if you are doing a 335 project and you go on a parts site and it says that the 335 and the 445 brakes are the same, they are not. So that was mistake number one, and luckily that didn't cause too much trouble. Mistake number two, in the center of this shaft is the drive for the speedometer gear, and there's a worm gear that runs off of that turns your speedometer. So when I got that apart, I noticed that we had a pretty significant flat spot in the splines of this gear, and it basically told me that it was seized. Here's the shaft. So when I went to pull it out, put a screwdriver on it just to give it a couple taps to see if I get it to go around, and that ended up happening. So the interesting thing is this is composite, which means they engineered this to be the weak point. They knew that they wanted this to fail before anything else failed, so that you didn't have a steel line that sheared off and was whipping everywhere. So had to find another one of these. I did manage to get the shaft freed up, so that is freed up, spinning, cleaned up, ready to go back in. The sticky widget is finding a 15-tooth worm gear for this, which I think I did. I don't have it in hand yet. I have it ordered. But it turns out that a 1941 through 1944 Willys Jeep uses something very similar. It's a composite material. It's got 15 teeth. The diameter was very close, and hopefully close is going to be enough to get this done. I don't want to change the gear to something with different amount of teeth, because then my speedometer isn't going to read right. So yeah, hopefully when that shows up it's going to be good to go, and then I can put that clutch or that brake assembly back together on this side, and then the brakes will be done. That'll be all sealed up, and we're ready to move on to the next phase. So those were the two big mistakes that happened this week that set me back and were a surprise, for sure. Aside from that, I also found on this plate for setting the brakes that this nifty little tab had been welded up. I guess I didn't really notice or pay attention when I took it apart, but the way it's supposed to work is the steel rod is supposed to come down from the foot plate right here, and it's got a couple twists on it, and the one end would be attached to a spring that would attach right here, and then as you turn it around, that spring would pull this down or push it up. So I don't know, well, I'll show you the rod in a second. This I'm thinking was put together to fix the rod, and I think the rod was the problem. The rod is what broke. But yet another example of the backyard engineering at work. Welded up, more weld. And here's our rod with extra rod welded to it, and the end is cut off to fit in the slot in their little bracket but this would have come out and then gone down so that as you turn it would pull that spring. I think I'm going to leave it the way that it is. I know I say that a lot, but I'm probably never going to set the brakes other than maybe when it's on a trailer. So again, it's not a huge deal to have it working 100% right and proper. So it is what it is, right? Okay. Next, I got into the 3-point hydraulic unit a little bit. I took it apart yesterday, started to get a good look at it. Don't have a whole lot to talk about just yet. The race in the cylinder is not bad, but it's not great. The rubber and gaskets for the filter, of course, were not in the best of shape. Probably reuse the filter, but I'll have to find some new rubber seals. But overall, I don't see anything major with this. So it doesn't look like it was taken apart before. It doesn't look like there's any extra welds or anything like we found on the rest of it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I don't find anything major and I can get this back together. So I still have a lot of cleanup left to do before I can put it under primer. I have this, I have the 3-point arms, I have the bottom brackets, I have the foot rests. So I've got quite a bit left to do to strip before I can put it under primer, which is unfortunate because we've seen a lot of humidity the last couple of days and I'm starting to get a little bit of flash rust. I cleaned it off twice already tonight and it just keeps coming back. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it under primer. And then the last thing that we'll do on this video is I did roll the engine over here in preparation for getting it married back up here at some point in the next, we'll say, 3 to 4 weeks. As you can see, I've got a majority of it together. This was completely broken all the way down, and I did from bearings all the way back up. And that was 3 years ago, and I put it under primer, and it's sat ever since. You can see I got a little bit of rust buildup on my primer that I'm not super happy about. Luckily, I can just sand that off. It's a self-etching primer, so really I shouldn't have to sand, but I will in this case. The only thing I've got left to do is the distributor, spark plug wires, and this I gotta fill it with oil, and it'll be, hopefully, fingers crossed, ready to start up. But that's still a little ways away. Alright, I think that's where I'm going to wrap this one. I'll continue to post and keep you up to date on where I'm at with it. And hopefully, one of the next couple of videos, you'll get to see me marry this thing back together for the first time in 3 years. It'll make me feel pretty good. So, if you liked it, please subscribe, give me a like. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Thank you.